Welcome to another video on displaying images with APL. Again, I had a problem when I wanted to display an SVG image that I was getting off the internet in my APL. And as we know, APL doesn't only supports JPEG and GIFs. So this is just a short introduction on how to do a GitHub repo for this. And I've got all the instructions there, so I'll put this link in with the video display, and all the code and the changes you need to make are on that website. I've also created an Alexa hosted skill called Display Vector Graphics, and I'll just talk you through what you have to have, the changes you have to make to that to get this running. The SVG file I wanted to display was this one here from this Norwegian weather forecasting station, and it sends you an SVG file, but I wanted that in an APL file. So we'll see how we can do that, and I'll show you it working at the end. If you want to, you can skip to the end of the video now and just see that bit so we know what we're looking at. So I've got these instructions, and they're, as I said, on this GitHub site. So we're going to download the SVG image, we'll convert it to a PNG, and because you can only display APL from an HTTPS website, we're going to save this in an S3 bucket and display that image from the bucket. Okay, so the converting I'm going to do is going to use this Cairo SVG site here, and you can have a look at the link for it if you want to. Okay, so I've started by creating an Alexa hosted skill, and I've called it Display Vector Graphics. You need to do a few things when you do that. First thing is just check your invocation name and check the interfaces. So I'll show you how to do that. So once you've created your Alexa hosted skill, you come in here. Remember, I've created a Python version here. This is all going to be in Python. You can just change the skill invocation name. Just check. This is often something like change me or something. So just change it to what you want. The other thing you need to do is you need to go to your interfaces and get there in the end. And as we're using APL, we need to scroll down to the Alexa presentation language and enable that. And you can enable it for the devices that you want. Note the new Echo Show 15's on here now. Okay, so having done that, you need to save the model and build it, otherwise, or save the interfaces. And if you go back to the build tab, get there in the end. Oh, okay. You can build the model. Let's say I'm building model down here. I don't actually think you need to do that, but it just say safest, I suppose. Now, okay, so the first thing we need is a couple of requirements. We need the Cairo SVG, and we need the Boto 3 to access the S3 files. So they are changes made in the requirements.txt file. So if we go to our code, and requirements.txt has come up. Obviously, it's where I left it last time. You can see that I've added the Boto 3 and the Cairo to the requirements. The SDK core is already there. So you can save those. I've obviously already saved those. So the next thing I do is I actually modify the create pre-signed URL. When you've got an S3 a file in an S3 bucket, you can't just access it. You have to get a pre-signed URL to access it from your code. I've talked about that in other videos. We'll just see it briefly when we go through this. But that I've just modified so it returns a couple of arguments that I use later. Normally it just returns the response. I add it so that it returns the S3 client and the bucket name. It just saves a few lines of code. So I'll show you that. So in utils.py, I just modify this return response here. The bucket name is here, gets from your S3 persistence bucket from your OS environment, and the S3 client comes from this Boto3 client and all this long arguments here. That's why you need to add the Boto3 to your requirements.txt. Okay, so just a couple of bits of handiwork there needed to be done. So don't forget to save the files, and then we'll look at the Lambda function code. So the first thing we need to do is to add some code at the top here. My computer seems to be particularly slow today. We need to add the render document directive so that we can add the APL. We need to add the URL lib request and URL open so that we can open the file from the weather station website. We need to import the create pre-signed URL and import our Cairo SVG so we can do the convert. Then here I've got some JSON which is used to display the APL. This is just a simple, we can ignore all this lot. It's just a simple main template with a couple of items. So this is item 0 and this is item 00. And here we get the source for our image from this line here. We're going to modify that line of code in our code so that that image URL will eventually be the image which holds the PNG file that we can display. So we'll access this by main JSON, main template, item 0 is the first items here, item 0 is this item here, and then the source here. Okay, so we'll use URL open to read our file and save it in a temporary folder. We'll then convert it using Cairo SVG and save that in our S3 bucket. So, to retrieve it, I'll just talk through the code here. To retrieve it, we use URL lib request retrieve, get the file that we want from the Norwegian weather station, and save it in our temporary file. You know you've got some temporary files. I've got another video on that somewhere. Now we can convert the file, so I'll just give it a file name, and we use this Cairo SVG to PNG to convert the file. This is the SVG file, and we write it to the PNG file name, which again is in the temporary folder. Then we save it in the S3 bucket. We're going to get a pre-signed URL so we can access it. Remember, I've modified that. So here's our object name. We call the create pre-signed URL with our object name. So it's going to save it as S3 meteogram.png in our S3 buckets that come with the Alexa hosted skills. And that will return our S3 client, our bucket name, and our URL that we need. Then now we can do the S3 upload. So we can upload the file to our S3 bucket. I'll just show you that. We've got some S3 storage here, and we've got a DynamoDB as well, but we're saving in this S3 storage as well. So we'll do an upload. We're going to call it the PNG file name, so it's going to be saved. Sorry, we're going to call it the object name, so it's going to be saved in the S3 file as S3 meteogram. The file name we save is the PNG file, which is this one here, which is on our temporary file, which that's the conversion we've just done. And we need to save it in a bucket. That bucket is returned now because I've modified the get pre-signed URL. So that's returned there. So now that it's been uploaded, we can use that as the URL for our APL. So we modify our main JSON, main template, items, item source, to give our Meteo URL file name, which was returned from our create pre-signed URL. Now we change the return so that it uses the URL. So we return, here's our add directive to add the APL. Here's our render document directive, which is why we needed to add it all the way up here. And we add the document, include the document main JSON, which is here. I've just included that in my code, not very good, but that's the way it goes. So full code is there. This is all in the GitHub stuff, and our code is here. So this is where I've added the code we need. Oh, we don't need that pill import image. Here's our JSON. Here's our code to get the file, convert the file, save the file, and modify the JSON and do the return. So I've added all of that within the launch request handler. So you can add that somewhere else if you want. Okay, so now all we need to do is to save. I've saved everything anyway. Deploy. I'll just deploy it since it was a few days ago just to show that it still works. And test the program. Now I've already tested this, so I'll set it up. I'll just show you what we need to do. Wait for the deploy to deploy. You can normally see it down here first before it's deployed. Okay, there it's done. So if you go to the test, remember if this is the first time you've done it, you'll need to click this button up here. I presume that's Amazon's website being slow this afternoon. Too many people buying their Christmas presents. So you just click this from off to development. And then in here, you can just say display vector graphics and I'll knock off the skill.io. And because it's in the launch,
Svg image.
you should get it straight away. So here's our Svg image. Oh, I just changed the speak as well. And sure enough, here's the weather forecast for London for this weekend. Okay, so I think that's everything. Oh, there's a reference there to a Stack Overflow, which is how I found out about the Cairo. That's it. Okay, I hope that helped you. And if you want anything else looked at, let me know.